Florence is a city you can walk across in 30 minutes, and yet it holds more Renaissance masterpieces than entire countries. A statue that stops strangers mid-sentence, a wine window still pouring drinks 400 years after it was built, a dome that took 16 years and basically invented modern engineering. In this video, the 25 things actually worth your time in Florence, real prices, what to book weeks ahead, and the one hidden terrace at number 7 that almost nobody finds. Let's go! Activities. 1. Florence Cathedral. The Duomo complex isn't one building, it's 6. The Cathedral, Brunelleschi's Dome, Giotto's Bell Tower, the Baptistry, Santa Reparata, and the Opera del Duomo Museum. And treating it as a 5-minute photo stop is the single biggest mistake first-time visitors make here. The cathedral itself is free to walk into, but the dome climb, the actual highlight, requires a ticket and an advanced time slot. It's 463 steps with no elevator, and the view at the top over the terracotta rooftops of Florence is the kind that makes the burning legs completely worth it. The Brunelleschi Pass, covering all 6 sites, runs around $33 30 euro. Insider tip. Book the dome climb the moment your Florence dates are confirmed. This specific ticket sells out fastest of anything in the city, often days in advance during the summer. And genuinely consider a guided tour for this one. The engineering story behind how Brunelleschi built the largest dome in the world without modern equipment makes the climb land completely differently. 2. Uffizi Gallery. If you have any interest at all in Renaissance art, the Uffizi is not optional. This is one of the most important art museums on Earth, and the collection spans centuries. But most people come specifically for Botticelli's Birth of Venus and Primavera, alongside major works by Michelangelo, Leonardo, and Raphael. The queues without a pre-booked ticket are genuinely brutal in peak season, sometimes exceeding 90 minutes. Standard admission runs around $28 25 euro, dropping to around $18 16 euro for entry after 4 p.m. starting in 2026. Insider tip. If you're visiting outside peak hours, the after 4 p.m. discounted ticket is a smart move. Fewer crowds, lower price, and still plenty of time before closing. Plan for at least 2 to 3 hours here. Rushing the Uffizi means missing most of what makes it worth the ticket. 3. Galleria dell'Accademia. Photographs genuinely don't prepare you for Michelangelo's David. The sculpture is enormous, extraordinarily detailed, and displayed at the end of a long hall so that it reveals itself slowly as you walk toward it. A staging choice that makes the moment land even for people who don't consider themselves art people. The Accademia is smaller than the Uffizi, so an hour to 90 minutes is genuinely enough. Standard entries around $22 20 euro, including the booking fee. Insider tip. Book well ahead in peak season. The Accademia receives nearly 2 million visitors a year, almost all of them here for one specific sculpture, and walk-up queues regularly exceed an hour. If you're staying multiple days, the 6 museum combined pass adds the Medici Chapels and the other sites for meaningfully better value than buying separately. 4. Ponte Vecchio. Ponte Vecchio is the medieval bridge lined with shops that have stood since the 16th century, mostly jewelers and art dealers today, and simply walking across it's one of the most defining Florence experiences. Cross it more than once if you can. Early morning, it's quiet and genuinely atmospheric, while sunset light over the Arno turns the whole scene golden. Crowds during the day, especially in summer, are heavy, so timing genuinely changes the experience here more than almost anywhere else on this list. Insider tip. Sunset is the move if you only cross once, but arrive at least 20 minutes before the light actually turns to claim a decent spot along the bridge or the riverbanks, since everyone else has the same idea. 5. Food and Wine Tour. Doing a guided food and wine tour on your first evening is one of the smartest moves you can make in Florence. not just for the food, but because your guide will point you toward the spots you'll want to return to for the rest of your trip. The Eating Europe Sunset Food and Wine Tour is genuinely excellent. It opens with a Prosecco toast, moves through 4 Tuscan wines and a Negroni masterclass, and threads in some of the best bites in the city along the way. Tours run around $147, €135 per person. Insider tip. Book this for day 1 specifically. Every food and wine tour guide in Florence has favorite spots they'll casually mention along the way, and you'll want the rest of your trip to actually act on those recommendations rather than hearing about them on your last night. 6. Piazzale Michelangelo. Piazzale Michelangelo is Florence's most famous viewpoint, and the panorama over the city and the Arno genuinely earns the reputation. The walk up from the center takes 20 to 30 minutes, with a bit of uphill in the final stretch, but nothing strenuous. Here's the honest part. People start arriving 1 to 2 hours before sunset to claim a spot, and it gets genuinely packed. Even so, the atmosphere is something else. Live music, real energy, and a sunset that doesn't disappoint no matter how many people are standing next to you. Insider tip. Go early if breathing room matters to you, but if you don't mind the crowd, the energy up there at peak sunset is honestly part of the experience. Just know what you're signing up for either way. 7. Terrazza San Miniato. If Piazzale Michelangelo sounds like too much, walk 5 more minutes up the hill. Terrazza San Miniato has the same extraordinary view with a fraction of the people, sitting right in front of the Basilica di San Miniato al Monte, one of the most beautiful Romanesque churches in Tuscany, dating to the 11th century with a remarkably well-preserved interior worth visiting on its own. This is genuinely one of the best-kept secrets in Florence. Not technically hidden, but somehow still overlooked by the crowds gathering just downhill. Insider tip. Do both in sequence. Piazzale Michelangelo for the energy, then the 5-minute walk further to San Miniato for the same view in near silence. Most visitors never make the extra effort, which is exactly why it's worth making. 8. Wine windows. Florence's Bouchette del Vino wine windows are one of those small historical details that make the city feel genuinely layered. These are tiny openings built into the walls of Renaissance palaces, originally used by noble families to sell wine directly to the street without a middleman. Most disappeared over the centuries, but a handful came back into active use during the pandemic when bars started serving drinks contactless through 400-year-old holes in the wall. A few are still pouring today, including at Ristorante Matteoni, Osteria Belladonna, and Babe. Insider tip. Search Bouchette del Vino on Google Maps to find the active ones around the city. Most aren't marked with anything obvious from the street. Getting a glass of wine passed through a centuries-old opening is a small moment, but it's a genuinely fun one. 9. Piazza della Signoria. Piazza della Signoria has been the political and social heart of Florence since the Middle Ages, and you feel that weight just standing in it. It holds an extraordinary open-air sculpture collection, a copy of Michelangelo's David among them, plus the Loggia dei Lanzi, where original Renaissance and Roman statues sit close enough to walk right up to, completely free. This is also where you'll find the Uffizi entrance, so you'll likely pass through more than once during your trip regardless. Insider tip. Come early in the morning if you want to actually appreciate the square without fighting through crowds. But honestly, this is one of those Florence places that never fully loses its magic no matter the hour. 10. Palazzo Vecchio. Most visitors to Florence walk straight past Palazzo Vecchio without stepping inside, which is a genuine shame, because the interior is spectacular. This building sits right on Piazza della Signoria and has functioned as Florence's town hall since the 14th century. The highlight is the Hall of the 500, a vast, ceremonial room covered floor to ceiling in frescoes commissioned by Cosimo I de' Medici with the scale and detail that's genuinely jaw-dropping in person. Entry runs around $23, 21 euro. Insider tip. A guided tour adds real value here specifically because of the political history. The Medici family intrigue that played out inside these exact walls makes the visit far richer than walking through with just a ticket and a map. 11. Tuscany Day Trip. Florence makes one of the best home bases in Italy for exploring the surrounding countryside, and getting out of the city for a day is genuinely one of the most rewarding things you can do if you have time to spare. Rolling hills, cypress trees, medieval hilltop towns, and some of the best wine on earth, all within an hour or two. Siena and San Gimignano are the classic combination, and a guided day trip covering both, plus a Chianti winery lunch runs around $113, 103 euro per person. Insider tip. Book a guided day trip rather than renting a car, especially for your first time in the region. You'll cover more ground, learn more along the way, and actually enjoy the wine tasting without worrying about the drive back. Self-driving in rural Tuscany looks romantic in photos and is considerably less romantic in practice. 12. Medici Chapel. The Medici Chapel is one of the most overlooked things to do in Florence, and that's genuinely surprising given how extraordinary it is. Built as the mausoleum of the Medici dynasty, the family that essentially bankrolled the Renaissance, the interior is unlike anything else in the city. The highlight is Michelangelo's new sacristy, which he designed and decorated entirely himself, including the famous sculptures of night, day, dawn, and dusk. It's one of the most complete single-space examples of his work, as both architect and sculptor anywhere. Entry runs around $19, 17.5 euro, and 30 to 60 minutes is plenty. Insider tip. This pairs naturally into a busy sightseeing day precisely because it's smaller than the Uffizi or Accademia. Don't skip it just because it's less famous. In a city full of headline attractions, this is one of the genuine, hidden in plain sight highlights. 13. Santa Maria Novella Pharmacy. Officina Profuma Farmaceutica di Santa Maria Novella is one of the oldest pharmacies in the world, founded by Dominican friars in the 13th century, and still sells perfumes, skincare, candles, and herbal remedies made to recipes that have barely changed in centuries. Even without buying anything, walking in is worth it just for the space itself. Frescoed ceilings and dark wood cabinets that make it feel more like a museum than a shop. Most tourists walk straight past without realizing what it actually is. Insider tip. If you're into beautiful artisanal products with genuine history behind them, this is a must-stop even on a tight schedule. It's a 5-minute detour that most visitors never make. 14. Vivoli. If you've never had an affogato, Vivoli is the place to try one. A shot of espresso poured directly over a scoop of gelato, deceptively simple until you actually taste it. Choose between the original or a pistachio version for a small extra charge. The pistachio is the better call. Vivoli's been making gelato since 1929, and the quality's consistently excellent. No towering rainbow piles in the window here, just the real thing made fresh daily. Insider tip. There are 2 entrances. The right one is affogato only, the left leads into the full gelato shop. Seating is minimal, so most people end up sitting on the curb outside with their cup, which is genuinely part of the charm rather than a downside. 15. All'Antico Vinaio. All'Antico Vinaio is probably the most famous sandwich shop in Florence, and the queue outside is proof enough that the reputation's deserved. The sandwiches are built on schiacciata, a soft Tuscan flatbread stuffed generously with cured meats, cheeses, and spreads. One sandwich is genuinely a full lunch. The original location on Via dei Neri gets a serious line during peak hours, though it moves fast. Insider tip. Go early or mid-afternoon once the lunch rush is thinned out if you want to skip the worst of the queue. It's cheap, it's delicious, and it's as local an experience as you'll find in the historic center despite how famous it's become. 16. Palazzo Pitti and Boboli Gardens. Palazzo Pitti, across the Arno in the Oltrarno neighborhood, was the main Medici residence for centuries and today houses an art collection that genuinely rivals the Uffizi. But for many visitors, the real draw is the Boboli Gardens behind the palace, one of the most beautiful Renaissance gardens in Italy, with fountains, sculptures, hidden grottos, and sweeping views over the Florence skyline. A combined ticket covering both runs around $21, 19 euro, and between the size of the palace and the gardens, half a day is realistic if you want to properly explore. One heads up, the gardens are mid-restoration through 2030, so expect some fenced-off sections and construction. Insider tip: wear comfortable shoes. Both the palace and gardens are genuinely large, and rushing either one means missing most of what makes them worth the visit. Book ahead in summer, since this sells out during peak season. 17. Fontana del Porcellino. Tucked under the Loggia del Mercato Nuovo near Ponte Vecchio, the Fontana del Porcellino is a bronze wild boar fountain that most visitors stumble across without knowing the story. Rub the boar's nose and let a coin drop through its mouth into the water below, and legend says you're guaranteed to return to Florence one day. Centuries of rubbing have polished the nose to a shine against the darker patina of the rest of the statue, visible proof of how many people have made the same wish. Insider tip: combine this with a wander through Mercato Nuovo, the covered market right next to it selling leather goods and local products. A natural 5-minute stop while you're already in the area. 18. Osteria Pastella. For a genuinely memorable dinner, Osteria Pastella delivers one of the most theatrical dining experiences in Florence. Their signature tagliatelle flambé is exactly as dramatic as it sounds. Fresh pasta finished tableside inside a wheel of Parmigiano Reggiano, then set on fire. The food is excellent across the board, but the whole experience is what makes it worth booking. This is the meal you'll be describing to people long after you've left Florence. Reservations fill up fast, especially on weekends. Insider tip: book ahead specifically if you want a special night out. This isn't the cheapest dinner in the city, but for one memorable evening, it's genuinely worth the price. Weekends sell out days in advance. 19. Giardino delle Rose. Giardino delle Rose sits on the hillside between Piazzale Michelangelo and the city center, and it feels like a well-kept secret even though it's right there on the map. Free to enter, home to over 1,000 rose varieties that bloom beautifully from late April through June, though even outside bloom seasons, the shaded paths, Japanese garden sections, and some of the best skyline views in the city make it worth the stop. Insider tip: combine this with Piazzale Michelangelo since it sits right along the same route. Go in the morning for near total solitude, or catch it at sunset as an alternative to the more crowded viewpoint just up the hill. 20. Caffè Gilli. Caffè Gilli has been serving coffee in Florence since 1733, making it one of the oldest and most storied cafes in the city. Right on Piazza della Repubblica, the interior alone justifies stepping inside. Belle Epoque mirrors, chandeliers, dark wood paneling. Order a cappuccino or a Negroni depending on the hour, and settle in. Table service comes with a standard coverage charge, typical for cafes of this caliber in Italy, but it's a small price for the atmosphere. Insider tip: this is the kind of stop that reminds you coffee in Italy is never just about the coffee. Budget the extra time to actually sit down rather than grabbing it to go. 21. Vespa Tour. Touring Florence and the surrounding hills on a Vespa sounds like a cliche and turns out to be genuinely excellent. You cover far more ground than on foot, and most tours take you well beyond the historic center into the Tuscan countryside. You can ride your own Vespa, most operators don't require prior scooter experience, or sit as a passenger if you'd rather someone else handle the driving. Tours typically run 80 to 155 US dollars, 73 to 141 euro, depending on length, and whether lunch and a winery stop are included. Insider tip. A tour that includes a countryside lunch and wine tasting is worth the higher price point. It turns a scenic ride into a full day that mixes adventure with the food and wine experience Tuscany's actually known for. 22. View on Art. For one of the best rooftop views in Florence, head to View on Art at the top of Hotel Medici, a cocktail bar with a terrace looking straight across at the Duomo. It's an ideal spot for an afternoon break or a sunset drink after a long day of sightseeing. The cocktail menu's solid, the atmosphere's relaxed but stylish, and prices sit on the higher end as you'd expect for a rooftop this close to the cathedral. The view genuinely justifies it. Insider tip. Reserve ahead, especially for evening slots and peak season. This fills up fast once people realize how close the Duomo view actually is from up there. 23. Cinque Terre and Pisa Day Trip. If you have an extra few days built into your Florence trip, a day trip combining Cinque Terre and Pisa is genuinely worth it. Pisa delivers the iconic Leaning Tower and the surrounding Piazza dei Miracoli, smaller in person than you'd expect, but still genuinely impressive. Cinque Terre is a completely different experience. 5 colorful villages clinging above the cliffs above the Ligurian Sea, one of the most beautiful coastal stretches in Italy. Guided day trips run around 106 US dollars, 97 euro per person, occasionally discounted lower. Insider tip. Book a guided tour rather than doing this independently. Train connections between Florence, Pisa, and the Cinque Terre villages are more complicated than they look on paper, and a guided day trip removes that entire layer of stress so you can actually enjoy both stops. 24. Pasta cooking class. A pasta cooking class is one of the most genuinely fun things to do in Florence, and arguably the best souvenir you can bring home from any trip in Italy. Options range from intimate sessions in local home kitchens to larger group classes and dedicated cooking schools. Most teach fresh pasta from scratch, and you sit down to eat everything you made at the end. It's a great activity solo, as a couple, or in a group, and a nice change of pace from a day of museums. Classes run from around 30 US dollars, 27 euro for basic group sessions and up to 90 US dollars, 82 euro for a more immersive experience with unlimited wine. Insider tip. Unlike most souvenirs, you actually use this one once you get home. Book it for a day when you want a break from sightseeing rather than cramming it alongside 3 museums. 25. Giunti Odeon. Giunti Odeon is one of those places that genuinely surprises people who stumble onto it. A stunning 1920s cinema combined with a bookshop right in the heart of the city with an interior alone worth the visit. The main screen is one of the largest in Italy, and the whole space carries an old-school grandeur that's not hard to love. Walking in, browsing the bookshop, and soaking up all the atmosphere costs nothing at all. If you want to catch a film, they screen original language movies with Italian subtitles on selected nights. A great option for English speakers. Insider tip. Check the schedule on their website in advance if a film is part of the plan. Screenings vary by night. Even without seeing a movie, this is worth 5 minutes just to stand inside and look up. That's 25 places that make Florence one of the most rewarding cities in Italy. A city small enough to walk across in half an hour and dense enough with history that you could spend a week and still miss things. If there's one thing to take from this list, it's book the big 3 early. The Duomo Dome, the Uffizi, and the Accademia all sell out during peak season, sometimes days in advance. If this helped you plan your trip, hit like and subscribe and let me know in the comments which one you're most excited about.